Welcome back, everybody, to His Heartbeat. Great to be with everybody again. And I have a wonderful guest, Kelsey Gallant. Did I say that right?
Yes.
All
Yep.
right. So she's a new friend. And I think it was maybe on Instagram. I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah,
Yep.
that she's an exciting person. She's doing a lot. So she's very active, just like my daughter. And a songwriter, also like my daughter, and an author, and I'm sure many more things. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Kelsey, and thanks for being here.
All right. Well, it's wonderful to be here. I'm very excited for this opportunity. Excited that you found me on Instagram.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, so I love to write songs. I love to write books. I feel like
Mm,
storytelling is just a really big passion of mine. So I tell stories through my songs and through the books that I write. And I also love spending time with my family and friends. I love to travel. I enjoy teaching. I like working with children
awesome.
and languages. Yeah, I'm interested in all kinds of different things.
Very cool. So I could be talking to my daughter Joanna right now. She'd say all the same.
Oh, wow.
Although she has not written a book, it's true. And now she's getting into the health field. But yeah, so what would you say, at what point did you really start displaying your storytelling? Did you do that as a kid?
Yes, storytelling was something that I always really enjoyed. I can remember probably when I was as young as maybe 6 or 7.
Mm.
I had a brother who's 3 years younger than me, and we shared a room. And at bedtime, I would tell him stories, and I would just be making up these stories from my head. And yeah, I still remember bits and pieces. Most of them were pretty crazy and interesting, but I love telling stories. And I remember I used to dictate stories to my mom and have her write them down because
Oh,
the
cool.
writing part
Did
wasn't
she
quite there
keep them?
yet.
Yeah, does she
Yeah,
have?
we
Very
still
fun.
have some. Yes.
Someday when you become really rich and famous, you can don't want to publish those. That's really cool.
Yep.
That's very fun. So, what kinds of things do you like to write about?
So, most of what I write so far is realistic fiction, and most of it is geared towards like around middle school age. The characters tend to
Hmm.
be maybe in their young teens, and a lot of it is focused on friendship and family and school and relationships and just all the things that are kind of typical things that kids that age go through.
Okay,
And
very
yeah,
cool. So you really have a heart for the what are they called? Preteens or
yeah.
teeny teens? Is that what they call it? There's some word for the preteeners. I can't think of it, but that's very fun. Yeah, I remember reading some of those books that my daughter was reading this whole series on cats. You remember that one? And they're I forget what it was called, but they're living in the wild and just their adventures. It was
Oh,
you know what I'm talking
yeah. Is
about?
it the Warriors series?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
I loved that. It was really cool. I was
Yeah, I've
glad she
always
was reading it.
I've always enjoyed like finding a good series that I can really get into
Hmm.
because once you finish one, it's not over. You can find the next one, and I love
Yeah,
that.
we'd be like walking to the bus stop and talking about whatever book we were on. It's really cool
Oh,
when moms can
yeah.
read with their daughters. So,
That is really special.
yeah, that's great. So, how about songwriting? Do you play anything or just sit more singing or?
Yeah, so I'd say I'm mostly a lyricist. That's kind of my biggest thing for songwriting.
Okay.
I have I like to play around a little on the piano and in the guitar, but I'm not proficient in either one. So when I create songs, a lot of times I'll either hire a freelancer, like somebody who's a really good musician. I'll hire them
Hmm.
to create music for a song that I've already written, or sometimes the program that I use on my computer to put the songs together, it comes preloaded with music loops that I can kind of play around with and build a song that way.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I have a couple songs that I've done some instrumentation for, but it's
Okay.
more of just the lyrics is my main thing.
So, can you find those on Spotify or iTunes, anything?
Yes. Yeah, if you just type in my name, Kelsey Gallant, on Spotify or iTunes, it'll show up. And then official Kelsey Gallant on YouTube is my name.
That's very cool. Well, I know you have a story to tell about your
Yep.
life, about yourself. So, yeah, let's dive into that. I'd love to hear what's behind that story.
Yeah. So is there anything particular that you want me to share, or do you just want me to?
No, but I know
Okay.
you had shared with me that there was really something on your heart to share.
Yeah. Well, I guess I kind of wanted to share my testimony
Okay.
and just kind of explain how my relationship with God has grown throughout the years.
Awesome.
So I would say that I first became a Christian probably in third grade. I went to a Christian school,
Okay.
and before that, I feel like I had had some knowledge of who God was, but hadn't really known a whole lot. And going to this Christian school really gave me a good foundation of understanding, like, who is Jesus and what is the Bible. And so that was a really good foundational experience for me. And
So, were your
uh,
parents Christians?
so the answer that I like to give, when somebody asks me that question of like whether I was raised in a Christian family or not, I feel like if if somebody who was raised in a Christian family is asking me that, the answer would be no. And if somebody who wasn't raised in a Christian family is asking me that, the answer would be yes. Because
Okay.
we didn't really go to church when I was younger. We started going when I was around the preteen age. Um, and I feel like it wasn't something that was like hugely talked about or important in our household, but we did have some kind of Christian foundation. So like,
Okay.
yeah, kind of in between. And I think that it changed over the years as well. Like we did eventually start going to church, and yeah, so it changed a bit throughout time.
So, would it be more that you would say morally they were living that Christian life, but, maybe not in knowledge or sharing that knowledge with you?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, they definitely would emphasize, Christian morals and values and things like that. I would say that maybe the relationship piece of like having a relationship with God wasn't something that was really talked about
Okay.
much in my home. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think, there was a generation, like my mom's generation, that you just didn't talk about it. You were to live
Mm-hmm.
it, but you didn't talk about it. And it wasn't emphasized even in the church to do that. And then we had this kind of revolution, I think, through people like Dr. Bright of Campus Crusade for Christ and InterVarsity and Navigators. They kind of got into trying to communicate the importance of this is the gospel. Let's communicate with people so they can know Christ
Mm-hmm.
personally. And
Yeah.
then there is the whole movement of like you have to pray to receive Christ. But but that's not everybody's journey. Some people's
Right.
it's just a slow evolving of getting to know God more and more over time. It's not like, oh, on this day,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus came into my life, So,
Yeah, that was always something for me. Like as I was getting older, as I was a teenager and entered my 20s, I would hear people talking about like their moment where they
yeah,
had like they remember the exact moment when they became a Christian, when they asked Jesus into their heart. And I never had that. I don't remember a particular moment. I feel like it was more of just a slow learning, and at some point I must have decided that it was what I wanted, but I don't have any memory of a clear moment of
yeah.
when that was.
Well, it's
But yet,
funny, right?
yeah,
Because it says all our days are ordained. It also says God knows everything from our beginning, even before we're born, till
right,
then when we go to be with him. And so we have that exact point, but he's already been at work, right? He's
right,
already
yeah,
said, hey, you're my kid. So I'm going to get you in Christian school. I'm going to get you to this place. I'm going to get your parents, that kind of thing.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really
Mhm.
amazing just kind of to look back on what God did throughout my life and like the ways that he kind of drew me towards him.
Yeah, I want to hear that. So, what are
Yeah.
those ways? What did he do? I want to know.
Well, so I feel like I had a really good childhood and just a really good life. My parents are great parents, and I have two younger brothers, and we all always got along really well. And I just always had a really good, close family growing up.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I really started experiencing things that were very like emotionally difficult. So I'm the oldest, and my youngest brother, who's 8 years younger than me, went through a period of time in his teens when he was just struggling with a lot of things, like some mental health things and just making some poor decisions. And he and my parents weren't getting along, and it was really stressful for me. Like, I like it when everybody gets along, I like it when everybody's happy. So
Hmm.
seeing him being unhappy was stressful. Seeing him and my parents fighting with each other was stressful.
Yeah.
So it it was really hard for several years, and there were definitely some times when I would be I would pray that God would fix it and that he would change it, and I kind of felt like there were times when it felt impossible. There were times when it
Mhm.
felt like that would never happen because just of what the circumstances were like. But over and over again, God did change things. He
Yeah.
did bring us through, and it got better. And there was a period of time when it would get better and then it would get worse again, and it would get better
Mhm.
and then it would get worse. But I feel like even through all of that, I was able to look back and remember, hey, the last time that we were in a situation that felt impossible, God brought us out of it. He did something good, things were better, so he can do it again. So I feel like those hard times really helped me start building that faith and that trust in God, and recognizing that even when things were really hard, like God would be there for me,
Yeah.
and he would also redeem the circumstances and make things better.
So I wish we had your brother on here because my question to you is, as an older sister, even if you're not older, but maybe there's a little more pressure when you are, what did you feel was your responsibility to your brother? And did you do anything, say anything, whatever, to try to help him? And how was that?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of it, I feel like I always wanted him to be happy, and I would always like try to do what I could. I would be there for him as just like a calm person who wasn't involved in all the tension and the drama, and just like, try to give him good experiences, try to be there as somebody that he could talk to. And we did.
Mm,
We maintained a good relationship even through
good.
all of those years.
That's cool. I think that's so key, whether it's a mother to daughter or to son or to brother, sister, brother, brother, sister, sister, that so many times we're trying to fix people or make them what we think they should be, right?
Yeah.
That we end up putting all this pressure and like you need to change, you need to that kind of thing, and
Hmm.
we drive them away, right? And the
Yeah.
most important thing is they need to know that they're still loved and
Hmm.
that, yes, you pray for them. That's huge. And I was just sharing with somebody who was struggling with their kid. And I said, look, it's not that you can't ever say anything, but ask permission. First of all,
Hmm.
just show that you love them no matter what. And
Yeah.
secondly, if they're like talking to you, if you're loving them no matter what, they're more likely to open up and talk to you. And when
Right.
they do, instead of go, well, that's a stupid thing to do, or if you do that, that's going to really mess you up, or don't do
Hmm.
that because, or even more turn off can be, well, Jesus doesn't want us to,
Yeah. Right.
right? But if you say, hey, can I just have a big sister moment to say something? But if it's too much, just tell me stop. And
Hmm.
especially if you say, and if it's too much, tell me to stop. And then honor that. And maybe they'll say,
Yeah.
not today. But I
Hmm.
think that keeps the communication open. It lets them know that you're there for them and that you're
Hmm.
not going to like cram something down their throat.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I'm not saying that I handled everything perfectly, because there certainly were moments when I would just be like, well, that's dumb. Why are you doing that? Or like
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But then I think I learned, and similar to what you were saying, I think kind of just being able to tell whether somebody is in the mood to talk. Like maybe there's one day when they'll be just completely closed off and like not receptive to anything, but then another time they might be in a different sort of mood and like really wanting to have a good conversation and really wanting to hear your perspective or share their perspective. And it's just kind of
Yeah.
being able to figure out when is the right time for conversations like that.
Yeah, I love that in that our sometimes the person that we will talk to is our sibling and not our
Mm-hmm.
parents,
Yes.
right? And there are
Yeah.
many reasons for that, but I think keeping that sibling relationship can be so important. So, what do you do with when you see your parents really hurting? That can make you angry, right? More angry at your brother. Did you go through
Yeah, it,
any of that?
yeah, I definitely remember that at certain times, and it was kind of it was mainly between my dad and my brother more so than my mom.
Mm,
Um, and I feel like a lot of times I would just feel angry at both of them for not getting
mm,
along with each other and like not getting each other's perspectives.
yeah.
And yeah, it kind of depended on the circumstances. Like sometimes I was more mad at my dad, or sometimes I was more mad at my brother, just kind of depending on what was going on and how they were handling it. But I definitely did a lot of praying, and I just, I feel like I'm a calm, peaceful person for the most part. So I was more of like just the low key kind of person who would, yeah, I don't know, like I wasn't so much like pointing out people's flaws and like what they were doing wrong. I was more of just trying to understand the perspectives, I think.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, by asking questions and not for the sake of telling them what to think, but to really
Mm-hmm.
listen and understand them. And my mom used to say, I remember she told me one day, there's a difference between a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. And God calls us to
Mm-hmm.
be a peacemaker. But the
Yeah.
peacekeeper can be very like too passive. You know what I mean? Like I'm just not gonna, you know. I mean, some situations, yeah, just let it be. That is true. So
Yeah, and I definitely think I like fell into that as well, because it was
mm,
like, oh, things are good right now. I don't want to mention anything because I don't want to like cause any problems. I can definitely see that in myself too, like maybe handling things the wrong way because I'm too afraid that I'm gonna
rock
start
the boat
something or
or
reignite.
say,
Yeah,
okay.
rock the boat, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very key to rely on the Holy Spirit and just
Hmm.
say, God, what do you want me to do here? So tell me about that journey. What's been your journey with the third part of the Trinity? You mentioned Jesus and Father. So how about the Holy Spirit?
Well, I feel like it's kind of just a lot of what you said, like kind of just that little voice that you hear sometimes, or that kind of knowing, maybe knowing what you should do in a situation.
Mm,
I remember one particular situation where my grandfather on my dad's side was living with us, and we knew that it was towards the end of his life.
mm,
And I woke up one morning and we had two church services. It was a Sunday morning, and there was, I think, a 9 o'clock and an 11 o'clock service. And I had set alarms to wake up for both because I wasn't really sure which one I wanted to go to. And I woke up to my alarm for the first one, and I was like, I'm tired. I think I'll just sleep and go to the second one. And then I had this thought about like, well, maybe I should go and like visit with my grandfather first.
mm,
No, I can do that before the second one. But then as I was laying in bed trying to get back to sleep, I couldn't.
mm,
And I kind of felt like the Holy Spirit was nudging me to go and
mm,
talk to my grandfather before I went back to sleep. So I did. And I went and I spent some time with him. And I went back to sleep. And then when I woke up, just in time for the next church service, I found out that he had passed away in
Oh,
that
wow.
time. So if I had
Yeah.
not gone down to talk to him when I did, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. And I really just kind of felt the Holy Spirit's touch in that moment and felt like it wasn't me, like
Yeah.
it
That's
was
very
him.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been asking God to help me to be more aware of when it's
Hmm.
him. And I think
Yes.
there's so many times where in retrospect I realize, oh my gosh, he was trying to tell me not to go to that place or not to buy that or
Yeah.
not to say that. And there's almost this way, I think one way to know is there's almost an agitation in your soul.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like there's an uncomfortability. You're in the middle of a conversation, you want to say something, and inside I feel this like nervousness, but I'll push through it and do it anyway. So I think
Yeah.
that's one way I might know. But another is like if I feel like he keeps my schedule for me sometimes, but I don't always listen, and then you end up
Hmm.
late. But you have this sense in you like, don't do that today.
Hmm.
And then
Right.
you think
Yeah.
it's you, though. You're like, "No, I can do this," and then sure enough, you go out, there's a horrible accident or whatever, and you're late, you know?
Yeah, it's
So,
always been hard for me to discern. Like sometimes I'll have a feeling about something and I'll be like, okay, is that God or is that me? And a lot of times it's hard to know, but I feel like that's just the sort of thing that you need to just kind of keep practicing, keep listening for his voice and
yeah.
yeah.
So are you currently going back to writing, and, what is your goal or desire in writing, and either songwriting or the books to the kids? What are your personal goals in your life, as it relates to that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'd say my biggest goal for both my writing and my music is just to impact people's lives in a positive way with it and like to have as many people read it or hear it as possible, and especially if it can impact them positively. So I have my one series that's not written for kids is specifically a Christian series, and it's more for like maybe older teenagers and also adults, and it just deals with a lot of difficult topics. It is fiction. It's called the New Life series, and I feel like that one in particular can be very life changing because it touches on difficult topics, but it handles them from a Christian perspective. So, and a lot of people that aren't Christians have read that series and have really enjoyed it, which honestly
Mm,
surprised me because it
mm,
is like it's very explicitly Christian. Like there's a
okay.
lot of talk about God and Jesus in there, but yeah, I was pretty surprised that a lot of people that aren't Christians just really connected with the story and enjoyed it. So I think
How
that's
do you
kind of my
know that?
goal
How do you
because
get
they told me.
reviews, or oh, it's
A
somebody?
lot of it is a lot of it is just people that I knew, but
Okay.
yeah, they so and then even my books for younger readers, they're not all what you would consider Christian books, but
Mhm.
I remember a period of time in which I was reading a lot of young adult books, like books written for teenagers,
Mhm.
and just it seemed like every single one had sex, bad language, inappropriate behavior, and I was like, I want there to be books for this age group that don't have that kind of content. So one of my goals is just to make fun, interesting, engaging stories that don't have inappropriate content in them,
Yeah.
or where the character can be more of a positive role model that kids could kind of read about and be like, oh, wow, like that character experienced peer pressure, but they were able to say no, and just kind of letting them see something different than maybe what they're getting in a lot of the other media or what they're seeing in their own lives.
Yeah, it's interesting because my my husband and my 2 kids and we all got together, and it was my daughter's birthday. I think her boyfriend was already with us. Maybe not. But anyway, so we're talking about how it seemed like all the movies that we would watch with our kids, like Disney and others, where the parent always died. It's like a parent
Yes.
had to die to have a plot. And my son actually is a film writer, and he said, well, it does set you up for an easy, I forget, he used some film terminology, but I understood, an easy way to have an interesting plot. Um, but both of them said they had a terrible fear because of that. They feel that
Oh,
that my husband or myself would die, or both of us. And
yeah.
I'm not surprised. I mean, it
Right.
started because we were talking about the Christmas movie Jack Frost,
Okay. Yep.
because that actor was in another movie we are about to watch, and it was so depressing at first, but then he becomes a snowman and it's super fun. But we there were several years that we didn't watch it because it was such a bummer. This kid was so close to his
Yeah.
dad and then he dies. But it did set up the plot. His dad comes back, and in the end he
Hmm.
even goes to heaven and all this stuff. But um it's interesting, the impact, and how do I make like you said, something really interesting without having to have graphic language or sex or parents dying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably a little challenging in a way to how to draw a reader in. I do nonfiction, so that's a little different. But
Hmm.
yeah, I appreciate the challenge of drawing somebody in to your story.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of times I'll even just in developing a story, like I start with something like that I know is going to happen towards the end that I'm super
Mm,
interested in, but the readers don't know that because they
right.
have to start at the beginning. So it's like, okay, how do I make this interesting from the beginning and build up to that part?
Yeah,
But yeah,
and
it can be challenging.
how do I get those details out? I appreciate my son kind of was sharing this with me. How you want to share the details of the person, that they're like in their 20s and they have a boyfriend and they live in such and such socioeconomic area, without having to say, and he's 25 and he has a boyfriend.
Right. Yes.
That's good. Well, so would you consider yourself a millennial? Or are you a
um,
Gen Zer? What's your
I,
age? I kind of do
I'm
know this.
30.
Yeah, you're a millennial. So, what would you say you feel are some of the bigger challenges of millennials today as you're interacting with your peers?
I think I might most of the people that I hang around with are a little bit younger than me, but I would say
Okay.
that this is probably still generalized to my age group too. But I
Yep.
think that just the like social media and all the cell phones and the digital technologies we have, I think that they have some great applications. And I think that if you use them for good purposes, then they can be really great tools. But I also think that people today are maybe a little too much into that sort of stuff. I think that people are maybe too influenced by what they see on social media or too influenced by wanting to have a certain presence on social media, and rather than focusing more on just living their real lives or being authentic. And I think that kind of as we were talking about, like with all the inappropriate or frightening things, even in kids' media, I think it extends to adults as well.
Mm,
And I think everybody is influenced by whatever media they choose to consume.
right.
So, yeah, I feel like the just a lot, I think it's important just to be careful about what you watch or like what you do when you're on social media, and just make sure that you're also spending time in your real life, like with your family and your friends, and pursuing your interests and all that sort
And
of thing.
and God, I might add,
Oh,
right?
for sure. Of course.
Yeah,
Yes.
of course. Getting, but that brings us to the topic of, and I want to fight one guy. He's an atheist, and he said, "Well, and we know that the church is dying and it's dissolving, and fewer people are going." And I said, "Well, that's actually not true. The Christian church is growing, not
Hmm.
necessarily in America, but
Hmm.
definitely around the world, and in places where there weren't even Christians, now there's like in Iran, over
Yep.
10, is it 10%, they think. And I'm about to go to Nepal, which is very Hindu, interestingly. I didn't know that. I thought it was
Wow.
more Buddhist, but it's only 18% Buddhist, but 10% Christian, and it's growing. I go to Bangladesh, it's growing. It's still really small, but it's growing, and
Yeah.
so I love that in Gen Z millennial. Yes, maybe the traditional churches are not an appeal at all, but I'm seeing these churches pop up that are now like huge, that are
Uh-huh.
really geared for millennial Gen Zs. And that encourages me. How about you? Do you feel encouraged, or do you feel like you meet more and more Christian people, or people are somewhat interested, even though they maybe aren't going to church yet?
It's hard to say. I feel like it kind of depends on what area of the country you're in or even what
Mm,
country you're in. I will say I attended a conference recently where people were speaking about Christian persecution around the world, and they were talking about in countries such as Iran and
mhm,
China where it's not allowed to be a Christian, and just kind of the struggles that the Christians there face. And something that I've reflected on before is how I feel like in some ways the Christians that have it harder, like that live in a country where it's illegal, they maybe are more likely to be more authentic in their faith and to
mm,
have it be such an important core part of them, versus like in America, it's very easy to get distracted by other things. And since we have religious freedom, we kind of take it for granted.
mm,
And I don't remember who this was, I don't remember where I heard the story, but I heard a story about somebody who was a Christian who escaped from a country where Christianity was illegal, and they came to America, and they were so excited because they were like, wow, like it's legal here, and I get to be with Christians, and like it's going to be so wonderful, and everybody's just going to be so like full of the spirit. And they
mhm.
came, and that was not their experience, and they were
Yeah.
so disappointed by what American Christians were like. It's like, you guys
I might
have,
have just heard that too. It was an
yeah,
Iranian. Yeah.
yeah. They
Yeah.
were like, you have the freedom to proclaim the gospel to everyone you meet, and you're not doing it. Like, what's wrong with you?
Mhm. Yeah. But it's challenging because when you do, people are like, "How
Hmm.
dare you?"
Right.
How,
Yeah.
like that's a private thing. It's like, I think it's all
Yeah.
how you present it. What do you find is a good way to talk to friends or people who are not Christian, and just begin to get them maybe thinking about your faith?
Yeah. Well, I think a really super important thing is just establishing a real relationship with them. Like,
Mhm,
if you go in with the goal or the attitude or mindset of, I'm going to convert this person,
mhm,
like, that's not really an authentic place to build a relationship. And they're going to be able to sort of sense that, like, you have an agenda, you have a goal,
yes.
versus if you get to know them, like get to know them, ask them about themselves, ask them about what they believe. It's really important to understand where they're coming from and why.
Mhm,
And then, make sure that they know what you believe as well.
yep.
But I'd say, and obviously every person is different, so they're all going to take things differently. But in general, I think if you can just kind of have discussions, like just open discussions where you're not judging, you're not condemning, but you're just sharing like, well, I believe in Jesus, and this is why I believe in Jesus, and what do you believe, and why do you believe that? And just kind of just a back
Yeah.
and forth conversation, I think, is a good place to start.
I like that. This is what I believe, but what do you believe? I'd love to hear. And what's that coming from, or whatever. Very good. And then after they share, instead of going, well, and then doing a rebuttal on something, but
Right.
but
Yeah.
rather, oh, that's interesting. I Then you said something like, oh, well, how did you come to that place? This can be
Mm-hmm.
a good question. I'm curious. I know for me how I came to that place is A, B, or C, kind of thing. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's really great. Well, tell us how people can get your books. Which is your favorite book? What would you recommend to start with, and your songs as well?
Yeah, so my books are all available on Amazon. And again, if you just type my name, Kelsey Gallant, I should show up. So I have my New Life series, which is a Christian series geared towards adults or older teenagers. I have a series called Allison's Notebooks, which is for probably preteens. And it follows this one girl from 6th grade up through high school. And it's like her diary. And it's just a lot of friends and family and fun and crushes and all that sort of thing. And yeah, it just kind of goes through her life. And then there's Waves Crashing Just Like Me, which is it deals with mental health themes. There's a little bit of romance. It's like a summer book, takes place on the beach. And then I have my brother Cameron and I, he's the one that's 3 years younger than me, we actually have collaborated and we've written a couple stories together. So we have Stuck on a Crazy Cul-de-sac, which is about a boy and a girl who are neighbors and decide to play tricks on each other. And it's just a
Cool.
funny, fun story. And we've written two books for younger readers called Tiger and Lily and Danger and Detectives. It's about a cat and a fish that are friends with each other.
Well, you've
So
written a
yeah.
lot. That's very cool. I love it. Yeah. So y'all can
Yeah.
look up Kelsey Gallant's books and go on Spotify. Same thing, right? Just type in your
Yes. Yep.
name,
Just my name on
your
Spotify.
songs.
Yep.
What's your favorite of your songs?
My favorite song that's out right now is called Beautiful Story. And this actually ties into what we talked about at the beginning of this episode. We had mentioned about my youngest brother
Hmm.
and how he dealt with a lot of struggles as a teenager. And I was always praying for him. I was praying that he would become closer to God and that he would be able to get away from all of the negative influences and the
Mm.
poor choices he was making.
So how's he
And
doing now? Everybody wants to know.
yeah, so this is just this is the premise of my song Beautiful Story, and this is why it's my favorite. So there's a lot that goes into this, but it was about 2018 that all the difficult things really felt like they started.
Hmm.
In 2022, I decided to take a trip to Belize with a Christian mission group called Experience Mission. And it was just Christians between the ages of 18 and 30 from wherever. We all didn't know each other. We all went to Belize for a couple months and we lived with host families and we just got to experience what life was like there. And the trip itself was very wonderful. I loved it. So glad I went. And yeah, I just thought like that was it and I was so glad I went and really glad that God kind of encouraged me to do that. But then a couple months after the trip was over, I there was this one girl on my team who I had become really close with and we decided that we wanted to see each other again. So we planned a trip together to go to Niagara Falls and to do some skiing. And we decided to invite our siblings along. My brother, by this time, had been doing better. So he and my dad were getting along much better. And he was overall happier and just in a much better place. But there were still a few things that were holding him back. And then we went on this trip, and the my friend who we were with, we went to her house also after the Niagara Falls and skiing. And her family is very like you can tell that they love Jesus. You can tell that their faith is very important to them. And my brother was just really drawn to that and really touched by that. And I think he had been kind of growing in his faith and seeing God working in his life too, but like seeing this kind of really made it bigger and better. And he and my friend's sister ended up falling in love. So they are
Oh,
together now. And
very
yeah, but
cool.
just kind of being around that family and that environment, it really helped him to recognize like, this is what I want. I want a
Mm.
relationship with Jesus too. So he got saved while we were there. This was in January of 2023. And yeah, so now he he is a Christian. That is something that's really important to him. And
Very
it was
cool.
just something that completely changed his life. And in that January of 2023, I got to see God answering so many prayers, things that I had been praying for 5 years
Mm,
or longer, just all these prayers getting answered. And it
mm,
was so beautiful. And it was even so before I went to Belize, I thought everything was really good. Like things were so much better than they had been, and I thought like, yeah, this is great. Like this is the best it's going to get. It's awesome. And then God made it even better. And that's
mm,
kind of the premise of my song Beautiful Story, is about how we might have all these ideas about how we think that things should go, or what we expect our life to look like, or we might be at a point where we're thinking like, yeah, hey, this is really good. But God is so much bigger and better than we even think of. He can do things that are beyond what we even imagine. And it was just it was such a joyful thing that happened. And so I wrote a song about it, and I wrote a song about how even when even when we think we know what's going on or what's going to happen, God has an even better plan in mind.
very cool. Well, thank you so much, Kelsey. This has been fun. Encourage y'all to look her up and all her talents and be blessed by it. So thanks for joining us,
Yeah.
Kelsey.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much for having me, Sue.
sure. It's been fun. So y'all have a great week. Go out and read a fun book by Kelsey, and we'll see y'all next week.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you.